Promotion and Tenure Committee makes its own advisory decision that goes to the dean. The dean then makes a recommendation, which then goes up to the university, and then a decision is made by the provost and the president. And for promotion to associate professor, it doesn't matter whether you're on tenure track or on educator track, you follow the same multi-level process. The DC, the FPTC, and the UPTC are all advisory committees, and they are there primarily to kind of calibrate the views and weigh up the evidence. There has to be consistency, but it doesn't have to be unanimity. Okay? You can have a conflicting minority report, as it were. But if there is a level of consistency, and the majority of the external reviewers are in favour, then you are likely to receive that promotion. So let's focus then on the educator track and look at the kind of criteria for promotion that exists there. And for this, we are doing exactly the same as we would do on tenure track, in the sense that we benchmark the criteria with another institution. For us, I think it's Berkeley in the US. But each institution has their, or in fact, each department has their own institution with which they benchmark. So the kind of criteria that one would look at would be basic teaching, would be pedagogy, would be research, and indeed would be leadership. And the criteria look to assess our colleagues as to their success as an effective teacher, a skilled and collegial teacher, a scholarly teacher, and an institutional leader in teaching and learning. In general, where does that evidence come from? How would I be able to indicate to these various committees that I have indeed met the standard, met the criteria for promotion? Well, the evidence comes from self-assessment, and that's largely through a reflective document. We each have to prepare a teaching portfolio. For that matter, it doesn't matter whether you're going for a promotion on tenure or promotion on the educator track. It would look at it would examine, for instance, your professional activities. What kind of activities you've been in? What kind of leadership roles have you undertaken? It would then look at the assessment of both indirect measures of student learning, for instance, student feedback. We all know how problematic those kind of diagnostics can be. But it would also ask the instructors and the teachers themselves to develop direct measures of student learning. So look at the examination results, compare them with previous cohorts, in order to determine whether the kind of teaching that you're employing, or the changes in teaching that you're employing, have actually led to improved student learning in a real way, not just a perception by the students whether they've learned. And then finally, peer review and recognition. And some of that is where your colleagues will sit in on your teaching and review your teaching, but it also can be awards that you have won. It can also be publications, in the sense that they have been reviewed, or you have reviewed other people, and so on and so forth. In order to get people promoted up through the ranks, there needs to be institutional support. That kind of institutional support is already sort of built in and for the tenure track. But it needs to be developed in most cases with regard to a teaching track or an educator track. And the things that we've changed in recent years with regard to educator track was to grant access to research grants. Those both educational and disciplinary. It used to be very difficult for people in the educator track to get research grants to do disciplinary research, although that ought to be a minor part of their research life. Also, getting access to conference grants. This is normally relatively or easier rather for people who are on a tenure track who are doing disciplinary research, but it can be quite tricky to find those kind of monies to attend educational conferences. And then another form of institutional support for educator track is if you have reached a level of senior lecturer or associate professor, and you have at least 8 years worth of experience at that level, then you can go on sabbatical leave for up to 10 months at an institution to do work on education research. All of these are signalling to the faculty the importance of education, the importance of the educated track to the rest of the community. It also requires us to take a broader model of scholarship. There are different knowledge types, and indeed faculty will attempt different forms of scholarship during their careers. There are content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and at that nexus, at that boundary, we would see content pedagogical knowledge. And it may well be, or I think this is in the minds of the university management, that the educated track are in the best position. They're not the only people, but they are potentially in the best position to bring and develop the kind of pedagogical knowledge into teaching to bring about innovative change in teaching. We need to appreciate the diversity in the forms of scholarship, and for NUS, it's not just disciplinary research. We are wanting very much to recognise the importance of the scholarship of teaching and learning, SOTL, and use the scholarship of teaching and learning on a case-by-case basis to identify the kind of achievement in terms of quality research that has been undertaken by people, say, on educated track or otherwise. Ultimately, the teacher is aligning instruction with curriculum standards that they know, in terms of that content, pedagogical knowledge, they know the students' needs, they design learning activities based on those needs, and they monitor the progress with formative and summative assessment. This model itself has been transformed, perhaps, in the last decade or so, with regard to the advent of and the importance of technology. Yes, so a new framework which is out there is the technological, pedagogical content knowledge framework. And this has come about primarily because of the importance of technology. There's now this need to enhance the previous framework to acknowledge really the affordances that are provided by technology. And we can see that there are more intersections. Previously I was talking about content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge, and so the kind of intersection would have been this green part here, but there are other intersections, say between pedagogical knowledge and technological knowledge, where the teacher is able to deploy technology that delivers a kind of instructional and learning activities, delivery in learning activities. Between pedagogical and technical knowledge, the teacher keeps the student engaged with technology in seamless and collaborative ways. But where we want our instructors to be, especially if they're on educated track, is at the centre, where they are able to synthesise all three domains. They are able to create a student-centred, content-focused, technology-infused learning activities, very much for the betterment of student learning. But student learning itself has issues, in the sense that students, as I kind of implied, are not necessarily the best people to identify that they have learnt well. Studies have been done. There was quite a nice study that was done at Hong Kong University, where they interviewed 55 students, and they looked at the transcripts of those interviews, and they identified the perceptions of teaching quality. And they recognised that they form from an interplay, really, of between the students' conceptions of learning and the beliefs about about teaching of the lecturer. The students' beliefs about learning can be placed very much on a continuum between passive and active learning. So the active learning students recognise active engagement, varied, multifaceted teaching with understanding, stimulation of interest, enthusiasm, the promotion of classroom interaction. Whereas the passive students recognised or saw the importance of organisation, clear information structure, clear objectives, clarity of communication, good pace, student workload and difficulty. The active students very much are focusing on a student-centred approach to learning, whereas the passive students very much